Brother, are you all right?
No, I am not all right. I just shared a bottle of Kanar with Damar. That rhymes.
You're drunk.
Of course I'm drunk.
Boomerang? We're not doing Boomerang. That's Peter Pan. We are talking sci-fi today, not Peter Pan, all right? Oh, hey. Hey, everyone. So, yes, if you're not drunk already, well, okay, so I understand it might be a little too early in the day for some people. It's the weekend. Tough shit. Get over it. Get yourself a drink, kick back, let's have a good time, because we are going to try to answer one of the more puzzling questions of all time. Does the size of the universe crafted in the sci-fi series matter? Oh, what? Did you think I was talking about a different size?
No, one size or the other.
Yeah, because the D was surprisingly large.
It may be too late in the day for him to be here in person, but at least he can be here in spirit.
Well, if we're lucky, he's at least in the spirits right now. Or the spirits are in him.
May the prophets be with you. But yeah, so that was something that actually had come up. I can't even remember the exact genesis of the question, or really the topic of the size of the world or universe building and how that plays into a sci-fi series, because just like with people, there are all sorts of shapes and sizes about when it comes to these entertainment properties and these little bits of escapism that take place.
I think that the main thing was really, does it matter how large a universe is if you're not going to use it?
True, because you can allude to a larger frontier and not actually then capitalize on it. It is getting to be rare where a series or an IP will actually take advantage of all that they have available to them. CBS Viacom.
Demonetized.
Believe it or not, the last episode did not get demonetized.
Not yet, at least.
Oh, it's been a week, so... Well, almost a week, so... Generally, they hit it right away if they're going to. So, maybe we can be more critical of CBS again? Maybe? Possibly?
No, the CBS auditor wasn't there this week, is what I heard.
Oh, so we lucked out on the timing. Alright then they can still eat a dick.
What makes you think they were stopped?
Well, maybe that's why they took the week off. They were in a bit of an overload situation.
But it is really one of those things where it makes you wonder what different franchises are thinking about when they are starting to try to do things with their IP, but they're not quite sure exactly what in the fuck they're doing.
Yeah, and this is one of those rare instances where I will give Games Workshop a little bit of credit, because they actually identified a freelance talent, and instead of trying to litigate them into oblivion, they hired the motherfucker. Yeah, for those who don't know, the Astartes project that actually got a lot of recognition and has been very well received for both the artistic quality and also the attention it brought to the Warhammer 40k side of things. Games Workshop, instead of being completely upset that someone was doing something original and creative based off of their IP, they recognize and are like, hey, let's hire him on to actually head up part of the creative staff. Granted, they still might screw it up, but they haven't yet. So far, they've made one good decision with that, and we haven't heard of anything bad coming from it yet. We haven't heard of the executives stepping in and screwing it up yet. It might happen, but it hasn't happened yet, so we can't criticize them in that way.
Yet. Which, actually, let's start off with Warhammer. Warhammer has a very expansive universe. And most of the time, the universe isn't really set dressing. It's actually something where the universe matters. The placement of things matter. What actually happens on this or that planet matters, because it might be referenced later, or it's something that's going to show certain aspects of the story later in a different way.
Yeah. And actually, Bowhammer brings up another good point with this. Apparently, Games Workshop is pulling their head out of their ass, because it's not just the guy from Astartes they've hired. Apparently, the Vraxen Death Corps of Krieg animation series that have been on YouTube, bringing them on too.
Now, are they hiring them in order to actually get them on this or on their side, so they can't work for others, or are they actually hiring them because they're interested in using them for their own work?
Yes.
I think that's the most accurate answer, especially since Games Workshop has been iffy, if I'm going to call it that, with so many things. Things such as we need to modernize this, so we're going to let people on and have a what's it called, corporation, I guess you could call it, with Marvel, and then they can fuck over one of the Primarchs.
Oh, you mean that comic that was supposed to be about one character, but they ended up killing him off and trying to make it about another character? Yeah.
Maybe that one, yes.
Marvel never fucks anything up. What are you talking about?
Nothing. Nothing. Or we'll get flagged by them as well.
Well, no, it won't be Marvel. It'll be Disney. Let's get that straight.
Yeah, I was going to say how much of it was Marvel itself and how much of it was Disney, which there's another thing. I mean, you have an IP that originally actually had a fairly narrow focus when you look at Star Wars, but then was allowed to grow through beta canon and was actually had that beta canon endorsed by its the actual IP creator, only for Disney to come in and say, yeah, that's all well and good, but nope, fuck you, it's all Legends now, it doesn't matter. But then we're gonna cherry pick the fuck out of it because we don't know how who write good.
Yes.
Well, that's because their entire writing stuff is from Marvel. So, I mean,
But this is something where, okay, let's compare with this just Warhammer and new canon Star Wars, because I can't say that the new shit is canon. Not proper canon, it's just, yeah.
it's cannon fodder.
It's there. I mean, sometimes you would give someone a grade for effort alone, but not in this case. I think that's why they're trying to actually find a way to work around what they did with that to better actually tell the story.
No, there's an easy way to do that. Kick the fucking people who decided that out. Bring back Legends. Bring back the extended universe. It's rather easy. The only thing they really can't do is actually do it, because then you don't have certain executives who are fucking all up in their own asses trying to get everything their own way without caring about the property itself.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest thing is I understand these companies are in it to make a profit. They're in it to get some return on investment. The easiest way to do that is to actually have people who care about the product working on it. I mean, you tend to get shit quality from people who actually don't care about the product or service that they're giving, so why encourage that sort of behavior and mentality? Oh, right, because of certain political tick marks.
Yeah, to be honest, that stuff can go fuck off. If you look at something like Warhammer or you look at Star Wars, there's already politics in it. I'm not just talking about the prequels. You have a lot of the politics involved with it, especially in the New Republic and stuff like that. You don't need more. You don't need outside politics.
Well, as Arch Warhammer said a while back, it's an escapism. We don't need our real-world politics infecting our entertainment and escapism. That's why we're there in the first place.
But my politics.
If all you have are your politics as your interests and identifying features, you're doing something wrong. You need to get an actual personality.
Today, having a personality is so blasé, though. It's much better to have a group of 5, and you're just part of those groups. You have no personality of your own. You have nothing that actually is your own. All that you have is that. You're part of, say, a certain political party, which means that you're only going to toe that party line. You're only going to do things that are in line with that party and what that party states outwards. You might be liking, say, some comics, and you're only going to like those comics because, liking those other comics is so mainstream.
See, that is something that I've never understood, is the illogical connections that some people are able to make. Oh, you like this, so it must mean this. It's like, I'm sorry. Be able to tell a good story that's engaging? Little else matters. Like, you can have so much freedom and flexibility with how you craft and identify and describe the characters you're working with, as long as you're not making the story about those details. I mean, it's the whole thing of, if you write a good story, if you can tell a good story, in my opinion, the size of the world that you're creating for it, the size of the universe it's taking place in, doesn't matter. Details about what the character has for preferences or appearance doesn't matter if it's a good story being told.
Yeah, and in that case, it can't be about what the character innately is, and that being all of it. Sadly, I would say this is something that Star Trek falls for a lot of the time, since they take something like, say, the Klingon, And the Klingon are, well, copy paste, carbon copy, Klingon. They are the violence. They are the kind of
brutes.
skewed concept of honor. Yeah, and you don't see so much else about them. You just see that, okay, they will always be like this. You can't get a Klingon to change it. But later on, when they started more exploring Klingons, say exploring stuff with Worf, or the stuff they did in Enterprise, you started to see that, okay, maybe, just maybe, this isn't all Klingons. This is just the ones who are actually out and about. These are the ones that you just see most often. And they are essentially the less able to actually do, act, or think in other manners than just that.
The hyper focus to a fault.
Yeah. Which makes them, it makes them less characters and more caricatures.
Yeah, good luck with that one, Jay. Yeah,
Oh no, it was Mute Donkey's suggestion that there is a way to do it correctly and not ruin the movie. It's not my point to tell him that. It's his job to tell him. He's the one who came up with the suggestion.
I don't disagree with the suggestion. It's just more, good luck getting them to listen. But that is one thing that I will say. There is one way to guarantee that those production companies, production managers, and producers get the message. Stop watching the shit material. And for those who don't recognize certain things as being crap, I'm sorry you're an NPC.
But,
Go for it.
Go. Now, we can see one of the major issues with all this in Hollywood today, where they want an empowered female character who needs to be the embodiment of just girl power. Girls can do everything that men can do, but better. And that's just on the silver screen. However, behind the scenes, if you have someone who doesn't really want to follow that, who doesn't want a total line of being just so submissive and being nice and just say, yes, massa, with a fucking hat in their hands after the movie production is done, they'll kick them out. Because they're only allowed to have one ideology when it isn't on silver screen. And that sure as fuck isn't being, a strong, independent woman.
Oh, this fandom hates strong, independent woman. Wait, we have a strong, independent woman here speaking her own mind. We can't fucking have that.
Kick her out. And even more to the point, when you have something like, say, the Harry Potter series, the Harry Potter series seriously fucked up the characters of Ron and Hermione, in that it made Hermione just, well, the overly fucking clever, always being so fucking sure of herself and never really having a problem that she can't solve. Always being that bit too good. And Ron almost always being the bumbling idiot who doesn't really know a lot more. Who's just, silly or stupid.
Well, to be fair, he is a ginger.
Yeah, but that just means that he has no soul.
That's right. He has one
He's
for
Irish,
every
though,
freckle.
isn't he? Isn't he Irish, though?
The character or the actor?
Character.
I
can't remember now.
Maybe.
I probably wasn't.
I think if he wasn't actually English or he was Scottish, because I know he sure as fuck wasn't Welsh or Irish.
Imagine that, him being fucking Welsh and speaking like, what's his name? The fucking guy. CGI.
Oh, Creaky.
Yes.
The creaky
Imagine him speaking
blinder.
like fucking creaky all the time.
Well, and
But yeah.
that's another thing with the writing. I understand that there are stereotypes for a reason, because there are a lot of people who play into them and bring themselves down to that level, but that doesn't mean you are limited and have to utilize those tropes in your own writing, unless there's a reason for the character to be portrayed that way. Like if there's a particular role that character archetype needs to be there for, great. Let there be a purpose. Let there actually be a part of the story where that sort of presentation fits with everything else, actually adds to the story instead of detracts from it. But that's the whole thing, is if it detracts from the story, or if it doesn't add or take away from it to be in any way, why was that decision made in the first place then? Because that is a thing. Just like with a single movie, just like with a single book or an entire series, you are crafting a larger picture that all the pieces should fit together and fall into place to support the grander story that you are trying to tell. And I think that is the biggest failing lately, is you have places that are trying to utilize the abundance of availability for a canvas that they can use, and are using it incorrectly. They're either trying to do too much with too little, or trying to do too much on a canvas that's too small. They're trying to oversaturate it, and then it just gets muddled and noisy from a storytelling standpoint.
Yeah, because going back to just Hermione and Ron there, they're trying to make her the ultimate female character, always being strong, always being smart. If you look at how it's portrayed in books, they complement one another. It's not something where Ron is always a bumbling idiot. Ron is clever in his own way. He can do shit. He knows about things that Hermione doesn't know, because he actually grew up in a wizarding family. And that's where, the way that they've done it now, Ron is essentially not a non-character, but he is a nonce. He's a fucking moron. And Hermione knows way too much than she actually should know, considering how she grew up.
Well, and that's part of where the dynamic between the two characters works, and you gotta give her credit for how she overall used those two in that way, because it wasn't. Yes, Hermione was put out and initially portrayed as this overachieving know-it-all, except when it came to a bit more of the practical stuff. She was definitely that teacher's pet type from school. And yet by the end of the series, we see growth. We see change from her and even Ron. Yeah, you still have those core tenets of who they are as people, where, yeah, she is a bit of a snot. So's the actress, but different topic for a different time. But you have core tenets that are established in the first movie and in the first book that are who the person is, almost to a fault, but then you get melding and adaptation and growth around that as one matures, which is actually a damn good message to be told, and a story, part of a story that people should pick up on, that the younger generations need to realize, is that just because you're one way now doesn't mean you will always be that way. Yes, there are some parts of your character, some parts of who you are as a person, that are intrinsically who you are as a person. But that doesn't mean you can't grow and change around that. And that's actually what you should be trying to do. You should be trying to be a better version of yourself. And the only comparison you can make is for who you are now is to who you were yesterday, or last week, or last year. Don't worry about comparing yourself to other people. Don't worry about comparing yourselves to some face and portrayal you see on a screen somewhere. The only comparison you should make is to yourself, and it should be an honest comparison and reflection.
Speaking of that, and something or other a show that actually shows that really well, Avatar, The Last Airbender. Not the other ones, fuck those. But Avatar, The Last Airbender, where you can see the growth of the characters in the show. Where you can see them going from being, well, children into actually starting to come to terms with the larger world, how they fit into it, and how they are, well, how they aren't really as perfect as they might see themselves to begin with. Which, mind you, we're also watching now on Mondays, 6:30 Eastern, just in case you want to come in and join. Yeah. When people have actually come in there.
Link to join the Discord servers there. And that's another thing with this. Between the anime, the sci-fi, what would you say? Would that cover 3 or 4 days of the week, guaranteed? Because we have the animes on Monday. We're going through the Stargate franchises on Tuesday. Wednesdays is kind of a variable because that's the voted upon movies. Then Thursday we're going through the Star Trek shows. And then Friday right now is the Dead Zone. So I guess it really depends on how you classify the longer term plans for Friday's viewing options.
Yeah, so at least 4 days of the week there's something sci-fi going on. And not to mention, if it happens that someone's bored, and Farscape happens as well.
Yeah. And I guess that's the thing. So you have, I think instead of just size of the world building or universe building being important, I think what people should really be focusing on more so is the quality and the depth of what's being crafted around the main character or characters. Because sticking with that with Airbender, in the actual series, not the horrendous wannabe abortion of a movie, you actually are utilizing the characters to figure out how this world is interlaced and how things are interacting, and really learning about everything going on, similar to the primary character we're following, The Last Airbender. And with that, when you focus it that way, when you are effectively utilizing a character in the show to show the audience everything that's going on, you don't have to rely on the large landscape that can be either an entire planet, an entire galaxy, or the entire universe. If you're telling good stories with good depth, how far out that depth goes doesn't matter. I mean, getting back to the Warhammer, with all the material that's out there, and all the material that's been put in the books, you're getting a lot of depth to a lot of the characters. On top of it, quite literally spanning the entire galaxy.
And to be honest, though, in Warhammer, the galaxy is important. There are some places where you wouldn't actually expect to meet, say, the Tau. There are some places where you wouldn't expect to meet the orcs. There's some factions that would never really meet one another because of their location in the galaxy. You can't just mix and match that and then hope that, oh, this is going to work. Because people will actually know it. People will figure it out.
Yeah. And that's actually something with Star Trek that kind of worked against it, but also did help it early on, because story from my grandparents. So my father is an original Star Trek fan. They watched it when it was being initially aired on TV in the late 60s. And my dad was that nerd who would then start doing the calculations based on, okay, they said that they were here and they were traveling for this period of time at this velocity, which puts it, and was actually breaking down from that nerdtastic scientific angle of how consistent are they actually being? How much of this is actually falling into place for what they have within the box that they have put themselves in? And yes, there have been inconsistencies there over time. Like, just what is a star date? How does it break out? We still don't fucking know. But
No, yeah, go on.
But because of that, because you are sparking that interest, even if it's from a small select group who then write in demanding the network continue on with the season 3, only for the network to then say, fuck you, we're cutting it off short, and then for it to pick up more steam through syndication afterwards, you only get that with good storytelling. You only get that if you're actually fleshing out the universe that you are creating as a writer effectively.
And this is one of these really interesting things when you look at Star Trek as a franchise. Because Star Trek is, it's varied. I think that's the best way to put it. You have, say, TOS, which spans a great region of space. You have TNG, which also spans a great region of space. And then you have DS9. And DS9 spans, what is it? Part of the Gamma Quadrant, part of the...
part of the Alpha. It
doesn't really cover that much space. It's essentially all the fucking space station. But with that, you have so many compelling stories. All of the universe is happening around it, and they are aware that it's happening around it, but you don't focus on this being a quadrant of a galaxy.
Mike71 brings up a good question. And we might even have a suggestion for him on how to do his own experimentation with this. How do you dial a Stargate when it's not on a planet, like when they blew up a sun?
Well, the issue isn't really too much how do you dial it up. Is it more how the fuck do you find it afterwards?
And you have that aspect, but also I think he's more referring to when you have a Stargate aboard a ship and you dial a planet. Now, if you're dialing somewhere else, if you're dialing out, I mean, that's one thing. But if you're trying to dial to that ship from out of the system, and say there's a Stargate on the planet and there's one up in orbit, which one takes precedence?
That's a good question.
God's auditor might be right. The way to fix it, at one end, crash your TARDIS into the Stargate. At the other end, crash a DeLorean.
You just got to make sure the DeLorean has its flux capacitor in there.
No. It's got to be powered by Mr. Fusion.
Hey now, Mr. Fusion is right next to Mr. Radar, which is right next to Mr. Coffee.
And don't forget Mr. Rental.
Speaking of too, and with Stargate and something that you don't really see too much of it. What about time dilation after they've gone through the gate on just normal planets, etc., not with the black hole?
Yeah, that's something they don't actually cover. The only time that they've gone into the time dilation effects has been black hole related.
Yeah, which if you have, say, for example,
well, and then you also have the tech from the Asgard, where they could create a time dilation field and either speed up or significantly slow down the apparent passage of time within that field.
yeah, because there must be planets, etc., where the dimensions of the planet essentially means that they are going at a different velocity, or in this case, they go at a different pace as to Earth, meaning that they will have some changes in time given the nature of time, and then come back to Earth, and the watches might be, say, a couple of seconds off, or a couple of minutes off, or yeah, you get what I mean.
Well, yeah, and well, so here's the thing. Let's think about it this way: the time dilation that they might be opened up to would be during hyperspace travel and through the actual transit of the wormhole from gate to gate itself. So using the gate to go from planet to planet, they're really not going to have much time dilation, a period of time dilation affecting them in that aspect. So their watches could be maintaining the Earth Standard Time, and then you just have a situation like in Deep Space Nine where, yes, Earth is a 24-hour day, and that's kind of the general Federation standard of time that they go off of aboard ship, but the Bajoran planet actually has a 26-hour day, so that's what they end up converting to and running the station off of. At which point, if you have a day with let's call it 10% time difference, for just to simplify the math a bit. Let's just go with a single order of magnitude there. What metric are they using to solidify the star date that they go off of? Because the most common explanation has been that the first digit signifies the century, 4 being the 24th century. The second digit is actually what they used to indicate the season of the show that they were representing initially. And then you have 3 digits for the day of the year, and then a 10th digit, 1 digit after the decimal, for the hours. So if it's based on a 24-hour period, how is that going to throw off things with Bajor's integration into everything? Yes, Tiny Captain brings up something very well, and this is where I am in agreement that Interstellar is the most scientifically accurate movie that we've had when it comes to long distance travel, because they actually have those time dilation effects come into play multiple times in multiple ways. Both the proximity to the black hole, Gargantua, but also the travel out to the wormhole, travel through, and travel back. When asked how fast the ships travel in the expanse, the riders replied at the speed of plot. Hey, you know what? At least they answered that honestly.
It all depends on how many orcs you can amass.
True, because the more orcs you have gathered around you and the more they believe something, the more true it's going to be. Just remember, red uns go faster.
And blue makes you invincible.
And what was it? Purple makes you sneakier?
Oh, purple makes you invisible. Because you never seen a purple orc, have you? I feel though like looking at the franchise or franchises as a whole, the one or the two at the top that have actually utilized the space that they have and everything surrounding that have been Warhammer and Firefly. Because Firefly is a very isolated show in the sense of where it takes place. It doesn't take place in a sector of a galaxy. It essentially takes place in a solar system. And just all the fucking moons and planets thereof.
Yeah, a sizable solar system. I think they said it was, what, 2 or 3 times the size of our solar system?
I don't remember what. It's really fucking huge. But it's still something that makes it grounded. You don't have hyperdrives. You don't have all those things that you would otherwise see in other shows, where they can go from one place to the next just like that snap of fingers. They have to actually take into account travel time. They have to take into account that, okay, we have this and that much fuel. Can we actually get there in time? And then the different climates of different planets, etc., that still fit in with how they're placed around the solar system.
God's Auditor, we have a representative here from His Holy Inquisition that would like to talk to you.
This is some deep hole that I'm not getting out again.
He does bring up a good point there, though. But that is something with Firefly is it was grounded, but in the sense that a spaghetti western is grounded.
It wasn't trying to be everything all at once. It was
True.
something where you actually got a somewhat clear representation of what humans would do if they were just, scattered or thrown at the solar system.
Yeah. Now, I do have to agree with Rodin on this one. Firefly was kind of wibbly-wobbly about whether it was one or multiple solar systems. And this is why it was such a travesty that Fox decided to cut it off at the knees after one season. And they aired the episodes out of order, which hurt its chances of gaining a proper viewing base to begin with.
Oh, yes, crew. We believe you.
Unfortunately, Dora the German isn't here, but I'm sure people are going to tell him about the wonderful use of the soundboard.
I hope so. He said so many things that are so quotable.
And it was so rapid fire, too.
I wonder, though, because we have things now like Star Trek Picard Season 2 coming out. And Picard Season 1 was all fucking over the place, trying to be more than it really was, and not actually giving you a clear indication of where it was. Will they do it differently in Season 2, or will they do the fucking same again?
I suspect it's going to be a bit more of the same, especially because of how they're bringing Q back into it. And just by bringing that character into the story alone, that is going to give them a lot of ability to do a lot of off the wall shit that they won't have to explain because, well, it's Q.
Yeah, this is something where I mentioned this before. You can have Star Trek take place in a single room as long as you have the right people. Let's just take something like the fucking episode of TNG where they abduct rather, Picard and put him in a room with the carnivore, the other guy that was afraid of getting eaten,
The
and
cadet.
allegedly the cadet. Yes.
Oh, yeah.
And that entire... Go on.
A properly written story, it doesn't require a huge set or setting as long as you know how to write a good story. And that was the thing, is you had good, competent writers in the working on the property then.
Yeah, and they knew how to actually apply this. They knew how to use what they had in order to do some new shit. Which is why I feel like many of these franchises are large for the sake of being large, not because they actually need the size in order to make a good story.
They're like I said, they're making up for a lack of substance. They're making up for a lack of depth.
Yeah, but take something like Stargate SG-1. Stargate SG-1 is Stargate Command and SG-1. That's the only real thing it's about. But it's about them, if they're on this planet or that planet or doing this or doing that, they are the setting.
Mm-hmm.
All the rest is just backdrop. It doesn't really matter. And they know it. They know that they can go to a fucking planet full of yellow sand with some blue purplish crystals. And that's the only thing they need for that planet. And then they get back to SGC, and that's all they need. They don't need more of a set. They don't need a huge spectacle of this entire planet. And then they spend 5 minutes there and do nothing more with it.
Yeah, and that's the thing with proper storytelling. The setting is going to be as large and diverse as need be. No more, no less. And generally speaking, the only times that they've really expanded the settings are when the stories have required it. Like when they've been going through the recurring themes with the Tok'ra and the Free Jaffa. That requires them to be in different, unique, more thought out and planned out locations. And they've used those during that time. So it is exactly that. It has been how it should be. It fits the story, and it is using to serve the purpose of furthering the story, not to make up for the shortcomings.
Yeah, and looking at it, I would say that Stargate SG-1 has done a better job at when it comes to different planets, etc., than Star Trek has in many cases, at least when it comes to TOS and TNG. Simply because in Stargate SG-1, it hasn't been about trying to flourish things in the background. It hasn't really been about... it hasn't been about trying to make it all seem so alien that it pulls your attention. Rather, okay, alien shit happens in the background. That's just what it is. There's nothing really more to it. It just is.
And when they've done this stuff in the background, it has been just that last little nudge, that last touch to amplify the story. Like when we were introduced to the Nox and the city in the sky. It was alluded to, it was loosely mentioned, but it wasn't until the end as that final nail to show that while these people look and appear to be rather primitive, oh, holy crap, they're one of the most advanced races in the universe, in the galaxy. Which just solidifies their importance and why the story played out the way it did.
Yeah, I feel like that's something where, looking at Star Trek, you do have many things where they do try to make it just as alien as they can for the sake of making it alien. Looking at one of the latest episodes now, when they went to what planet was it? With the older guy who did not want to be moved from there. I can't remember the name of the episode.
Oh,
Kira helps extradite the guy, or evacuate.
oh, the farmer.
Yeah, I can't remember the name of the episode. But looking at that, you had so many things there which were alien for the sake of being alien. You saw his home, and you had so many things there that were alien details, not so much for practicality, but because we needed to look alien.
You needed it to look like it was a Bajoran home on a different region that was not Earth. But at the same time, I would say that touches like that were actually called for, because part of it was the guy didn't want to leave there. He did not want to leave what he had established. And so by showing those details, by going through and showing the little nuances of the home and the farm that they did, he built that. He made that what it is. It was his energy and effort and work that went into all of that. So it was showing the tangible fruits of his labor to justify why he was so against relocating. But again, you don't get those sort of things if you don't have the depth to actually pull from. You don't get those sorts of details and that intricacy unless you're truly putting forth the effort to completely craft the characters themselves, let alone the backdrop that goes with them. I guess Donkey was on a mission to find the verse.
Yep. One of the myriad of pictures of it. Okay. Go on.
Which even then, while the image that he has is the most widely accepted, there has not been an actual officially sanctioned version of it put out. It's all been pieced together of, okay, judging by this stuff, this is what it appears to be like.
Yeah, and actually, looking at this and the Great Tatooine, the Stanwood Black Tortoise in the bottom right there, we do actually have another universe, but a fantasy universe, the Discworld, which is it's a huge universe in and of itself. But it takes place on a disc that's essentially What is it? The disk is roughly 10,000 miles across.
Maybe that's where the Flurfs got the idea from.
Oh, we could hope, because in that case, magic. Magic everywhere.
And that's effectively what their answers break down to, anyways. Well, why does it work this way? Why does it give the appearance as if we are on a globe if it's actually flat? But instead of magic, they say perspective.
You know, I prefer the magic part because it's hard to make perspective make it so that an elephant has to lift its leg at certain times in order for the sun to be able to go through.
But if that were the case, then at some point there would be times where the sun is never visible from anywhere on Earth. But since the Earth is so large, how could we ever confirm that to be the case?
Oh, we can't. We can't. Australia isn't a thing. It's just lies.
Perspective. Rather ironic that we divert off onto this tangent. When I was on the iNetwork on Thursday, me and Mike Bertelson were talking about flurfs and periscopes and photonic masts nowadays.
Oh, yeah, because they've gone with electric instead of the pure optics.
Yep.
I mean, to be fair, with a purely optic telescope, you need to have a proper fairing around it, or you're going to get vibration of the periscope, which might make it a little difficult to see shit.
Vibration doesn't matter. It's still a telescope. I mean, that's like saying that you should hold a camera still when you're trying to take photos. Don't need to do that.
Well, I mean, when you have a dive officer that can't keep the scope above the water in a calm sea state.
Oh.
Yeah. Or if he does keep the scope above the water, you also all of a sudden hear the slap of the planes.
Breach? What? Smack! Told you.
Oh no, that was always my favorite, because knowing the depth of the ship and where the fairwater planes were, sitting as helmsman, divesman, you'd be sitting there. Yeah. Broach, and the dive would slap you, and then right on the water, dive goes broached. Once you get those fairwater planes up, that it's so hard to get the boat back down with just the stern planes if you don't flood enough back into the trim system.
Tiny Captain, does nuh-uh mean magic in Flurf language?
Yes.
Yeah, I would have to say that it does.
Here's some. I was like, just had to be that fucking moment to cough. Here's something though that I'm not actually sure if it's been done. Has there been any sci-fi universes that take place just on a submarine?
Sequest?
Yeah.
Isn't that isn't that a submarine and other stuff as well?
Well,
the concept of this submarine is very much sci-fi.
The primary set piece is the Sequest DSV, is the submarine named the Sequest. They do pop in at other spots, which is typical of a traveling type set piece. But as for, I guess the closest thing that would fit that I'm aware of, for the entire setting being one vessel, one location under the sea, Sea Lab 2020.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've seen that.
You'd enjoy it. You know what?
Oh.
You know what? Maybe we'll start watching Sea Lab after Avatar. Oh, Mute Donkey has a good one. 20,000 Leagues. Maybe.
Maybe. Yeah.
No, because I'm just thinking, with a submarine, you could have a completely isolated system where essentially everything that happens needs to happen aboard the submarine itself. And that's kind of what I mean with Sequest, because Sequest isn't really a closed submarine. You have so much going on both outside and inside of it. If you had something like a submarine setting where they still have to navigate, they have to deal with shit. Let's say that they can't even get to the outside because of, well, the composition of the water or whatever the chemical they're in, and just make it about their struggles and actually trying to deal with this. Deal with not having unlimited power, deal with if there's something going on so that it actually spring a leak, all those things.
So what you're saying is a day in the life of a submarine.
But a sci-fi set.
Essentially, but sci-fi.
So imagine if you take something akin to a 688 and then plop it onto one of the moons of Jupiter. Completely alien landscape outside of the ship, but it's also a landscape that they only can deal with what they have inside of the hull. And they have to keep that hull integrity.
Intact.
Yeah.
Now, because with that, you could have it so that, well, depending on the size of the ship, etc., you can have different factions in it. You can have it in such a way that your space magic mumbo jumbo won't work the same way down here. It's not like when you have a starship where, as long as you have propulsion, you can essentially go anywhere. If you don't have propulsion there, someone might actually have to fix that shit. Or they might have to find a way to fix that shit somehow. Along with things like, well, growing their own food.
Yeah, you would actually end up having to have quite the substantial vessel, at least for...
You'd have to have something the size of Sequest.
At least.
Bare minimum.
Yeah, in order to have that sort of potential dynamic really play out and have that self-survivability, unless you start throwing some of the tech that's akin to Star Trek in there with replicators.
That would kind of ruin it, though.
It would, because resource scarcity does make quite the plot point to have to deal with, which is what they tried with Voyager, although not exactly in the most effective way possible.
But there is actually
Felix's cooking was the best. Come on now. I even have the cookbook.
There is something that they could take from, though. The Matrix. You remember the Nebuchadnezzar? And, well, their food, or snot, or whatever it was.
Protein paste.
Ooh. Yeah, let's just call it that. Just have to squeeze out the socks, get more protein paste. But yeah, with all those things there, we can have it so that, yeah, sure, they have the very basics if everything else is working, including the water purifier, if they have water. And you can base it and then off, or base it off that.
True. And had we stuck with the presentation style similar to the first installment, yeah. But then they ended up ruining that with Matrix Revolutions and Reloaded. Ugh. Tiny Captain does bring up a good point. The Abyss, sci-fi movie, doesn't leave Earth. Not exactly a submarine, but it's an underwater drilling platform. Experimental, if I remember right.
If you want to go with that, though, you almost want the sphere more. That's, yeah. Let me see here if I can find the thingy.
Is that a technical term?
Yes.
Right next to the doohickey.
It's short term for thingamabob.
Okay, this is not fair. Satsu 2 Cents is on Twitch cooking Korean barbecue tacos. Now the question is he actually cooking it or is it a game version?
That is a good question. And Mutanki does bring up another one that's kind of has some of what you're looking for, but not exactly, with Snowpiercer.
The Snowpiercer kind of works. Because the main thing that I'm looking for with all this is a closed ecosystem. I haven't seen something where they actually do have a closed ecosystem in anything so far.
That would be that would be quite the challenge in the setting and management of the story. But again, you get a good creative enough writer on it, it could work.
Yeah, because sadly, well, maybe not sadly, but I feel like so many times having an open system like so many other places have, like Voyager, they want to make sure that it seems closed, but they always take on more food. They always do shit that...
Well, they have their resupply hits.
Yeah, and with that, it doesn't seem as serious as they try to make it out to be. Especially when they're growing food in the fucking hydroponics bay, which would just maybe feed one person for a week off a whole fucking crop or whole harvest. It just does not seem quite right. But if you have to grow all the food on your own, or maybe not on your own as in individually, but you have to grow all the food for the ship on your own, you have to make sure that you have water. You have to make sure that everything is actually in tip-top conditions so that,
it survives and produces a usable harvest, yeah.
Because they start getting into the aspects of it that should have been in the Martian, etc., with hydroponics, with being able to grow shit in multiple layers without having to use as much or as many resources.
Dora brings up a good point with Snowpiercer. Thinking it's a really dumb idea. All the energy spent on building tracks, instead of creating some proper bunkers into the ice. I will have to admit, I have not seen enough of it to speak further to potentially counter it, but there could be something else going on to justify it. I haven't read the original source material at all, and I've only caught bits and pieces of the first couple episodes. So I am ill-informed to speak on that one directly.
I've not watched a single minute of it.
Whenever I hear Snow Person or Snow Pacer, it always makes me think of that movie, the animated movie. Was it Tom Hanks plays the train conductor?
Polar Express.
Polar Express, yeah.
Yeah, I think that maybe they're not down the same vein.
You know, it's funny you mention that because there was that flurf that I talked to the other week that apparently because there is an airline version of the Polar Express that she was gullible enough to believe longer than anyone else, everything's a conspiracy.
Yes, everything is conspiracy because I believed something, or because I can't believe something, or even worse, I'm unwilling to believe it because that would mean that I have to stop believing something else as well.
Oh, people would never do that.
It's almost like a certain episode of Star Trek, or Star Trek DS9, where teaching different things in school got brought up. As in teaching a religious philosophy versus trying to teach a natural philosophy.
You know what? And that is actually something that I would. If
You want to discuss in a full episode?
Well, we could, but rather than go down that road with it, I would just like to say that I wish I could have been in the writer's room when that script was first drafted so I could point to the person who was responsible for that bit of dialogue and then smack him upside the head, because for Keiko to say, I'm not teaching philosophy, I'm teaching science, is one of the most idiotic lines in that series, especially in that season, that was ever put to paper for an actor to say.
Okay. Yeah. Sadly, though, with Star Trek, you have very many times where they're trying to say something in a really smart way, or they're trying to make a good point in a really dumb way. And it's something where, well, science fans will see it for what it is. They will see it as something where they fucked up what they actually said. They fucked up the definitions of these different things, which is kind of like saying, oh, it's just a theory.
Mm-hmm.
And sadly, you have the kinds of people who take Star Trek as being just science and then take that and run with it. And then you have that shit spreading everywhere.
Wait, you mean there are people out there who will manipulate misunderstandings of basic terminology for their own personal and professional gain because they're assholes? I mean, who are we? The Atheist Experience?
Those among others. But remember, it's a monkey, not an ape.
Don't make me hurt you.
Hearing that the first time already hurt me. But yeah, you have that kind of shit, and you have that kind of shit too, where people try to misconstrue words, or they try to use certain words that have a very specific meaning in one context, and then try to use the same words in another context and think that they mean the exact same thing there. Even people who are quite intelligent who try to put something that works in one context onto other things, like trying to use the scientific method when it's about something that's in relation to people. It's rather where it's in relation to people's interaction with different things and one another. It's convoluted. And Star Trek should have known better. They should have been way fucking more well aware of what they were trying to put out there. But sadly, they weren't.
Yeah, and I see that being that I will give shows latitude because let's face it, a lot of your writing staff, a lot of your creative staff are going to be writing about things that they don't always know the most about from a content and context standpoint when it comes to subject matter. I get it. There are going to be things that are missed. But don't have a technical reference staff and then fail to utilize them. Because I think that's what happened there. Is they kind of skimmed over it a little too quick and were looking more for technobabble type stuff instead of coherent accuracy in conveying actual ideas of a technical nature.
Yeah. They dropped the ball. They dropped the ball hard.
Yeah, and it happened then, and it's happening now, just to different extremes. And no, Mute Donkey, I have not been watching Falcon and the Winter Soldier. I've actually heard mixed reviews on it, so some people like it, some people don't. I mean, but isn't that the case with a lot of things lately?
Yeah, most of the time. It's almost like people have personal taste.
What?
No, that can't be right.
You have got to absolutely be kidding me. Sorry, I found a new toy.
Apparently.
Oh, actually, Rode sent it to me in a firmware update, and I totally forgot how to do it.
Nice.
Here's one thing, though, that I have not fully understood yet in Star Trek. Why in the fuck doesn't the universal translator translate certain phrases when those phrases are still used in other sentences, etc.?
How deep down the rabbit hole of Big Brother, government, and observation do you really want to go?
Will there be Section 31?
Possibly. Because some people have actually floated the idea out there that the Starfleet communicator, the Starfleet comm badge with the built-in universal translator, which is always active and always working, might actually be in effect and being used as a way to selectively censor, edit, translate, and manipulate language and communication between people to make it most advantageous for the primary party involved, in this case being the Federation.
Is this something where we're going to have to go back to, is the Federation a utopia or not?
Yes. It does stem from that, in that not just is the Federation actually a utopia, but what was the cost to be in that utopia? I mean, some people out there have gone so far as to try to say that it is a truly communist ideal environment and setup. Yeah.
No.
Yeah, about that. Sorry, if anything, it is as close to a democratic socialist meritocracy than anything else when you look at everything in the aggregate. Because you're still having bits of commerce and trade. Currency involved or not, you are still having some trade take place, which means ownership and deals and other sorts of conversions taking place, which automatically cuts out pure unabashed communism just right away.
Yeah. I'm going to say that with the whole thing with Star Trek and, well, the Federation, so much of it boils down to, well, the Federation themselves and Starfleet are so into this that they don't even see how bad it is. Say just something like, okay, a crew member died on your ship, someone that you were close to. Oh, well, send them to the counselor, everything will be fine. Just medicate the fuck out of them if it doesn't work. You have shit like, oh yeah, these people were trapped trying to go onto this planet and saving this planet covertly. Oh, you know, Prime Directive, let them die. You have so many situations where the Federation, or not Federation, but where members of Starfleet and the Federation seem so fucking callous to something or something like someone's death. They just don't seem to really care about it. Okay, this ship went missing. Silly, I guess. We can't really do anything about it. These people overhead died. Just wholesale, 1,000 people dead in a fucking in a Starship incident. Oh, oops. Well, the warp core breached because apparently there were microfractures. Nothing we can do about it. You have so many things like that. It kind of makes you wonder how many people, quote unquote, disappear or die every year that have maybe anti-Federation or anti-Starfleet looks on things or views on things.
And did they really disappear, or did they have a maintenance failure that led to some catastrophic event?
Yeah, we never know. Which is the main issue when you look at Star Trek, because Star Trek, on the surface, when you look at Starfleet at least, seems to be a very, very, very nice system. They seem to be almost spotless, except for the admirals. They seem to be positive. They seem to have this outlook of the future that everything's going to be so much better. And then you see the Admiralty and well, the shit that they've been trying to do. You see the other species there, like the Klingon, who don't have the same ideals, but who well and truly understand what the fuck is going on. You have the Andorians, who don't necessarily adopt the Federation ideals, despite being part of it, but they don't really see it the same way. You have a Quark, who quite perfectly nails it down when at least it comes to humanity. They might seem like the nice people, they might seem soft, but take away all those comforts, and they turn as vicious as any Klingon. And that's really something that has a huge part in all this. People are kept comfortable. People are kept happy, at least as a very bare minimum. You have things like the holosuites where you can go, even if it's something where you can't travel there necessarily. You have shit like, okay, I want this. I want a new wristwatch, whatever. You can have it replicated. Even if it isn't really something of great value, as in you don't really have many things of great value anymore, unless they get filled with gold-pressed laden, or they have historical value. People still feel happy, or at least content with how things are going. how much of that is just done to keep them just over the limit of content?
Keep them happy enough, and they won't go looking for the reasons for what's actually taking place behind the curtain. And Davros brings up a good point. The fact Section 31 isn't being addressed is a worry for a unified galaxy. It's rather telling that Section 31 even exists, especially with how the Federation has portrayed itself for so long. But then again, at the same time, the best way to ensure peace is to be ready for war, which some people may disagree with, but it does have merits. So when you hear about these other species having their own agencies, like the Obsidian Order, like the Tal Shiar, you kind of gotta at least have something of a level playing field if you hope to have a chance.
And this makes me wonder, when we see the events of Enterprise, or the events preceding Enterprise, in regards to the caste system there, did the Klingons do the right thing? Did they do the right thing by essentially letting the warrior class take over?
For their society, I would actually have to lean towards no. Because despite the stability, relatively, that has been brought about by it, and because of the cultural identity of what it means to be Klingon, stemming from it and being fostered and actually being encouraged to maintain that cultural identity despite all odds, you still have stagnation. You still have to where the Klingons haven't exactly been the most technically savvy of the interstellar species that are experienced, and part of that could be because of the hyper-focused aim of the warrior caste that is effectively running the show. Look at the Federation and Romulans. You have a more balanced approach to governance, which lets the scientific arm of things actually progress, actually push the limits, and actually make more significant progress. And it's part of the reason why there was the technological trade between the Romulans and Klingons, because each one had something that the others didn't, and then one side kept progressing while the other kind of stagnated for the most part.
And this is also... Go on.
No, go ahead.
No, this is also something where if you had let the Klingon philosophers, etc., take over there, or do what they wanted, how much of that would have turned into the Klingon being more and more, let's say, castrated? Have their culture taken away? As in, have the culture taken away wholesale, not just the aggressive parts. And more turn into just being content. Not necessarily wanting to do much more, but just cruising through. Not having to really do much more than just deal with those small immediate issues.
That actually is a good question, because I would expect some sort of social decay and stagnation to happen, and the question is on what kind of scale. But then again, with how ardent the warrior caste has been, would that have led about to an even bloodier revolution? And would they have gone to even more hardline the direction that they ended up going? That would be an interesting social commentary and evaluation of it, in that when you push a group that is as ardent as the warrior caste of the Klingons are, they're not going to be pushed aside so easily or willingly. What kind of backlash would a significant enough push from the arts and sciences end up doing? I don't know if they would have been able to survive that sort of catastrophic fissure in their social hierarchy.
Wouldn't that also depend on just how how pervasive the Federation is?
Yes.
Because we know how much they can do. We know that they have actually done quite a lot of, let's say, distasteful things. How hard would it be for them to make it so that anyone who has connections with, say, the Warrior Cast, when you listen to the Warrior Cast, nothing that they say makes any fucking sense. You have to actually be able to speak Klingon properly in order to understand them. You would cut off so many people from them just by doing that alone.
True, and then you have a divide and conquer scenario.
Yeah, because with that, I would not put it past the Federation as it is to do some shit like that. To, well, quite frankly, just alienate everyone within one cast of the Klingon culture. Doing so knowingly, doing so in such a way where if any of the warrior casts is even trying to get a truce or trying to explain things, things will instead come out as, well, threats. They'll come out as, we want to kill you, and therefore a retaliatory strike will be needed. Or even that they hear things from the people they're trying to talk to, that turns into more, yeah, fuck you, we're going to kill you all, goodbye.
And that's where the whole question of how effective and adaptive is the universal translator when it comes to actually conveying the message that's intended versus a poor, emotionless translation of just the words.
Yeah, we don't really know. And even if someone actually finds this out and they're trying to, log it and shit like that, logs go missing. Sometimes you even have explosions just completely exposing other things.
Data rods get corrupted and damaged when a ship has some sort of incident on it.
Yeah, and with something like the Federation, and just how insidious they are, well, shit happens. They could even, fake the entire logs. Or fake logs on a derelict ship saying, oh, these people attacked us. Send something like that to the Klingons. Well, the first thing the Warcast is going to think about is, how do we get revenge?
Yep.
They're not stupid. They might be, one-minded, but they're not stupid.
Some of them are, though. But then again, we don't want to just hamstring it to the House of Duras.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do.
They kind of make up for it in other
ways.
But they're not all fucking packlids. Let's just put it like that.
True.
Because packlids are smart.
Make the ship go.
Ah, yes, Gowron is having a bit of fun too.
But
And
but
go
why
on.
don't you come over here to explain to me why you're afraid to transport over?
Okay. Ah, clever bastards. But this is something where how much, or rather, how hard would it be for the Federation to essentially have a separate transporter buffer which they can send into enemy territory, just under the guise of being something else, and using the same technology that Scotty used when he was stuck by the Dyson Sphere.
It's the technology isn't different. It's just what he did was he programmed it that upon energizing the transporter beam, he put the system into a diagnostic loop, so it conserved power while also not allowing the signals in the buffer to degrade because the buffers were constantly being evaluated and rehashed, so you didn't have that degradation over time, as they explained it in the series. But depending, I,
Techno Mumbo Jumbo.
yeah, yeah.
But how hard would it be for them to do something like that? Even have something like a shuttle. Oh yeah, we're just transporting, transporter materials, and they can bring 20 people into an enemy territory, just completely fucking reprogram everything they need, and then psst, out of there. They have the resources to be able to do so.
Yeah. This is true. Davros is challenging me to a fight in the Mutar Nebula. As portrayed on screen or as it would actually be in reality? Yeah, because sometimes they just go with the cool factor. But with that insidious nature, and it did take me a moment to actually let the comparison of the Federation and root beer actually hit home and realize just how spot on Quark actually was.
Yeah, that's the scary thing about it. It's like have you ever played Killzone?
No.
Killzone is a game where essentially you start off the game fighting people with really pale skin in gas masks, and let's say that it looks like most of their gear was actually designed by Hugo Boss. And
So, Deathcore of Krieg?
kinda, somewhat. But yeah, you play the game fighting against these Helghast, and you think that, yeah, you're on good side. The more you play it, the more you realize that, oh shit, they're defending themselves from what we did to begin with. We were the instigators. We fucked up. But you don't realize it until you actually start examining what's being said. The Federation is essentially oh, we're being so nice, aren't we? While holding a phaser to your throat and having you nod along. But it's not really a physical phaser. It's a phaser with the threat of what happens if you don't join us.
It does. It does make things rather interesting to go back on and review incidents, and does make you wonder, were the Romulans wrong to be wary and aggressive against the Federation, specifically Earth? Hmm. On the subject of size, the Reliant was a smaller ship than the Enterprise. Yes, with common componentry. A good comparison is the refit Enterprise and the Miranda class, specifically the Reliant, are comparable, similar to the Galaxy class and the Nebula. Oh, Archer did not like the Vulcans much at all at the beginning of the series. He reluctantly
For good
allowed,
reasons.
yeah, for quite good reasons when you really look at it, and he reluctantly accepted T'Pol. But then when she made it shown how useful she actually was and how she wasn't as stuck up as the rest of the Vulcan High Command, his attitude towards her changed. And his attitude towards the rest of Vulcan in general didn't change until he got to meet more of their offshoot societies, which ended up becoming the prominent social groupings later on in the canon.
And let's not forget either, we have Archer and the Andorians. He didn't quite trust them at first. He just saw them as essentially being, well,
A useful
angry people,
ally.
paranoid. Yeah, but in the first episode that they were introduced, they were just some paranoid bastards, really. But there's something fishy here. We kind of have to have a look at it anyway. And then realizing that, okay, yeah, shit. They were right. I was right in suspecting that there was something more to this. And understanding that our new allies, or our allies here, might not be everything that they're propped up to be. I've suspected it, but now I know.
Mm-hmm. And that's the thing. You have growth and understanding and shall we say, a more relevant understanding of everything based on new information and further information. I mean, there are times that, yeah, things can be as they first seem. Or you could be completely wrong. And when you're wrong, how do you handle it? It takes a very mature and wise person to take that new information and say, I was wrong. And because of this new information, this is the position I held before is not the position I hold now.
Which we need to bring up something. One of the greatest pairings ever in sci-fi. Just to show that. O'Neill and Mayburn.
Yes.
And
and
just
the way those characters would interact with each other, especially later on.
you can tell that they had fun. But the way that Mayburn is first described, he's essentially a stock villain. He's someone that you put on for a week and then, throw away when he isn't useful anymore. But then he got brought back. And you see some more of him. You start seeing more and more. And at the point where we are at in the story right now, you can see more of actually his motivations. He isn't doing it because, or wasn't rather doing it because he was evil. He wasn't doing it because he wanted to be powerful that way. He essentially started doing it because he actually fucking cared about Earth.
Well, yeah,
He
he
cared
was.
about.
His motivations weren't your typical villain motivations that were selfish.
No, and that's something where even the interactions he has with Jack, where he knows that, okay, shit, something went down. I wasn't the one who shot him. He might be a bit miffed at me when I say hi again. And then he does actually say hi to Jack, and Jack is well on his way to try to throttle him. But you can still see that he was willing to take that step. He was willing to time and time again actually put himself into danger for the sake of redeeming himself, for the sake of actually showing that, yeah, all along I actually did care about it. I haven't really cared about the organization as much. They were more of a means to an end. But I have cared about Earth. I have cared about these important things.
Mm. And again, it goes back to the bigger point amongst all of this. You're only going to get that sort of character progression in that sort of setting, even with the amount of time between appearances of that character, if you actually have good, coherent, consistent writing. So, to me, it is much less about the size of the setting that you're crafting. It is entirely about the depth and how you utilize it.
Giggity.
God damn it. Gee, I wonder where that's going to be sent and saved.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Uh-huh, sure.
Doesn't arrive till Tuesday.
But we have to remember, the diva is surprisingly large.
Just compare the sizes, not necessarily the height, but the volume.
We need to do some in-depth research here.
This is some deep hole that I'm not getting out again.
Maybe that's why he's afraid to come back on the show, because of how we always seem to get him into positions to craft such wonderful sound bites.
He gets
Ring
himself
my
into
bell
that.
to be a special subscriber.
You can have something completely innocuous, and Gail will still do that.
Not always on purpose, and that is the masterful part of it.
Yeah, Gemmas are really good at doing that, aren't they?
Among other things. I just don't know how much I trust them with a barbecue.
Nah, it usually turns out quite bad. I wouldn't even trust them with home renovation either.
This is the way. This is the way.
At least not with the bathroom. Which, speaking of, why don't we...
No, I was just thinking, it's like, there's the old saying, beware Greeks sparing gifts, beware Romulans bringing presents, beware Germans carrying plumbing tools.
Oh,
Save me, G-Man!
but speaking of, and this is something that it's really fucking uncommon to have, or rather to hear it. One of the best portrayals of space Nazis has been the Cardassians. Now, what people have to remember, not all the Germans during, the prelude to World War II and World War II were Nazis. Few actually were. And with the Cardassians, you see a society that's built up around this idea of a great Cardassia. Do your part for Cardassia.
The state
Everything's
before the self.
yeah, and you see how some of the characters actually struggle there. How some of the characters are, well, damaged for life because of the things that they have been through, even though they are seen as the bad guys wholesale. Like the episode that we saw, well, this week, Duet, where Maritza, first of all, actually says what he was. He says that he was a filing clerk. He accurately describes everything that he did. And then it turns out that, oh, it's not actually Maritza. It's Gol, what's his face? Pahil.
Darheel. Yeah.
Oh, Darheel. Close enough. But it's Gol Darheel. And they're trying to find out what he actually did there. They're trying to, well, get him for what he did. And then it turns out, no, he isn't actually Gol Darheel. He is Maritza, who's been through plastic surgery in order to look like Gol Darheel. Because he was so torn down. He was suffering for everything that happened when he was in the camps. He was suffering from hearing the people scream and being able to do nothing. Having to crawl under his desk and just put his hands over his ears because he couldn't take it. He wanted the Cardassians to suffer for it in order to make things right for the Cardassians, to show the other Cardassians that it wasn't just all good, it wasn't all nice. Someone had to answer for it. And with that, it brings up one of the Garrick's quotes later on, especially the lies.
Yes, that wonderful bit of conversation between he and Bashir.
Yeah, and looking at that episode again, looking at Duet again, you can really tell how he was actually crafting that in his head. You can tell the trying to tell a story so innocuous that it can't be true. It was something so simple, something so innocent, really, that it couldn't have been true. At least not according to Kira, because she wanted him dead. Even if it did nothing, she still wanted him dead.
Because of who he represented, who he appeared to be, someone had to pay, and that visage was in charge of that labor camp that led to so many deaths of her fellow Bajorans, that someone had to pay for it. And that was a tough pill for her to swallow when the truth of the situation came out, and that actual psychology side of it came out as this man was not the villain that you are attributing him to be. How can you punish him for the actions of another?
Yeah, he was a victim in it. He couldn't help it. No matter what he would have done, he would have been fucked over. And that is something where, just going with analogies here, when it came to Germany during World War II, not everyone was actually in support of the regime. Not everyone did so willingly. Because let's face it, if you have the choice of, okay, do these things, or get shot in the back of the head along with your family, it's not really that black and white what you want to do.
Yeah, and I've said it before that there were a number of people that, in order to survive what was going on the surface, proclaimed to be in line with the governing body of the nation at the time, but in actual reality did not agree with them, but saw no other choice but to effectively submit or die. And the Night of the Long Knives did solidify that for a lot of them, because you had a lot of prominent anti-power base voices get taken out simply because they did not toe the line with the power base that was in charge.
Yeah. And that being said, there were a lot of fucking shit stains too. There were people who reveled in it, especially since, well, you now have a sliver of power. You have something that you really haven't had before. Even if it means that you have to, well, quite literally, put people to death daily, that's still something that they were wanting to live with.
They saw it as a means to an end, and they had justified it within themselves. And
Yeah.
And that we are coming up on the end of the time slot, and some of us would like to take a wee bit of a break to get something to eat, drink, refresh, recharge before we come back in the next half hour to 45 minutes for the next stage of fun. The next stage of the greatest show about nothing, because who knows what the hell is going to go on for the rest of the evening. I heard someone was playing with their worm and invited others to join, and it might actually be something that can be done on YouTube. I don't know. You'll have to wait and see and find out along with the rest of us.
As long as you keep your covers on.
I don't know. There
It's
is
so inappropriate right now.
There is one question to keep in mind, though, and do you put a sock on your worm?